Hello, I'm Casimiro Torres of the Fortune Society, and I'm filling in today for Ronald Day, who is on vacation. And welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the criminal justice system from various perspectives, including from those most impacted by the criminal justice system. We discuss critical questions about how the current system works, its intersections with social justice, and highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone that is affected by it. We ask you, the viewer, to spread the word about Both Sides of the Bars and share your comments with us on Twitter at the Fortune Society. Today, we have our guest, Councilmember Daniel Dromm, and Senior Vice President of the Fortune Society, Stanley Richards. Today, we're here to discuss Stanley's recent appointment to the New York City Board of Corrections.
That's correct.
So, welcome both gentlemen. And Councilmember Dromm, tell us why it's important to have someone like Stanley Richards appointed to the NYC Board of Corrections.
Board of Corrections. So it's important to make that distinction as well, because there's the Department of Correction and there's the Board of Correction.
Yes.
And actually, when I first got involved in this issue, I did not know that. Even as a council member, I was not aware that there was actually this Board of Correction. And they have an awful lot to say about what goes on in the Department of Corrections. And the first time I had any contact with the Board of Correction, I was very surprised at the makeup of the members of the Board of Correction, mostly all white, and many people disconnected from the prison or the jail system in New York City. There was one friend of mine who was on there, Catherine Abate, the former Commissioner of Correction, and I highly admired her, but I was just really surprised at the lackadaisical approach that they took toward the Department of Correction. And initially I went in there because I was challenged by the founder of the Fortune Society, David Rothenberg, who said to me, if you want to do something to help the formerly incarcerated, he said, do something about solitary confinement. And that's why I approached the Board of Correction. And so when an opening became available, the speaker came to me because I had gotten a little bit of a reputation in this battle about solitary confinement. And she said, do you know anybody that you thought would be appropriate for it? And I said, look, I think it would be historic if we could appoint somebody to the board who's had experience going through the system. And that's when Stanley came to mind for me. Because, you know, I think having someone who knows what it's like to have gone through that system, to have been there, to have experienced those things, brings a whole nother approach, of fresh ideas to what needs to happen on Rikers Island to turn that situation around.
Thank you, Councilman. Stanley, what does it mean for you personally to be appointed to the Board of Corrections?
Well, for me, first of all, it's an absolute honor to be seen by Councilmember Dromm and the City Council, Speaker Viverito, to be really the voice, being nominated and appointed by the City Council, really being the voice of the City Council and the city on these issues that Board of Correction is facing. So first and foremost, it was an absolute honor. You know, I've been involved in the criminal justice system, and I've done this work because this work to me is really personal. And you don't do this work looking for opportunities to be recognized. And to be recognized in this kind of way was very, very powerful. So first, it was an honor. Second, I think Councilmember Dromm said it, it's important for the Board of Correction to be, to have the voice of the men and women who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. As minimum standards are being set, as rules and policy is being formulated, it has to be shaped by the experiences of men and women. And my role now as a member of the Board of Corrections will allow that to happen.
Thank you. So, Councilmember, we know that you understand that Stanley brings a unique perspective to the Board of Corrections. What would you be hoping for him in terms of impact?
So I think you know, we addressed the idea of having Stanley bring his experiences to the Board of Correction, but I think also he gives hope to people who have gone through the system as well, that they can turn their lives around, that they can be productive citizens, that they can be taxpayers, as the Fortune Society likes to say as well, and actually aspire to become a member of the Board of Corrections, where he has oversight now over the Department of Correction. It's an amazing journey when you think about it. From having been formerly incarcerated, coming through the Fortune Society, becoming a vice president, he brings that hope to people that they can turn their lives around. And that's another reason, I think, why we so wanted a formerly incarcerated person to be on the Board of Corrections in New York City.
Well, Stanley's progression certainly speaks for itself. But Stanley, let me ask you, what do you hope to achieve being on the board?
Absolutely. So part of what I hope to bring to the board is sensibility around policies and standards for the care, custody, control services of the men and women who are confined on Rikers Island. The second thing, I think, as Councilmember Dromm laid out, is to be a sort of beacon of hope for so many people who don't have hope. I mean, I remember when I was in prison, that's all I knew. That's all I've ever thought about. I never seen myself in any other light, ever. And so I hope that I bring, because people know my story, I hope that I bring a sense of possibility, a sense of hope, a sense of reality that it's hard to build a new life, but it's doable, as long as you're willing to stay in the fight. And that's a huge piece of what I hope to bring.
I agree. I think the sense of hope is critical. And
Yeah.
I think we all know that in prison it's a very hard place to retain something like hope.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you feel the issues are the New York City Board of Corrections should be taking up and addressing currently?
There's a number of issues. One, we still have so much more work to do with respect to solitary confinement. There's been a number of positive moves in the right direction with the new enhanced housing unit. But we are right now in the middle of what I would consider a significant fight to hold on to what we've made in terms of progress with punitive seg, and to make sure that we're not rolling those advances back. So that's one big area. The other area I think we have to focus on is really looking at why so many people are on Rikers Island.
Yeah.
The city council, the mayor proposed some real significant work with bail reform. I think that's the next big front. And for the Board of Correction, our work is making sure that the men and women who are in the custody of the Department of Corrections, that they are provided with opportunities to not come back. That is services, access to care, and access to a new life.
Such things have been proven to be very effective with the Fortune Society as well.
Absolutely.
Councilmember, do you want to add to that?
Sure. So one of the things I'm really hoping to see is a change in the culture on Rikers Island. Because there's this culture of violence, this culture of dominance, this culture of people already being convicted before they've actually been convicted, and I think that needs to change. You know, Stanley and I were at a hearing earlier today with the Board of Correction, and the language from the Department of Correction was something that was troubling to me. They use words like inmate. They're not inmates, they're detainees. They're people who cannot afford bail, and if you could afford bail, you wouldn't have found yourself in the situation of being on Rikers in the first place. They use words like incarcerated. They're not incarcerated, they're being detained. And I think one of the things that I want to see is even down to the vocabulary that they use, and I'm going to write some letters on this issue to the commissioner as well, because I think that tone and the vocabulary that we use infers that these are people who have already been convicted of crimes, and that is not necessarily the case. And so that change in culture, it requires also that change in vocabulary. And then there are a whole host of other issues there, but visitation was one of the things that we talked about today at the hearing. And you know, it takes a full day for a family to get to visit their loved one on Rikers Island. Between the time you start out in the morning, get across the bridge, go through the visitation center, wait for them to call the detainee down, have the actual time with the person, get back on the bus, get off the island, and get home, your whole day is done.
Full day.
Most people cannot afford to do that and to be able to spend that amount of time trying to visit a loved one. And that disconnect from being able to see your loved one, to offer them advice, to give them a defense, is very detrimental to the folks that find themselves on Rikers Island.
Almost seems like a deterrent.
It's almost a way to push people back, and in many ways, I think that's what's happened with Rikers Island. One of the board members today, Bobby Cohen, called for the complete termination of Rikers Island in itself. Why do we need an island where we ship people off so that other people don't see them, so that they're pushed aside in society? You know, Rikers Island is a mentality in many ways, and we need to end that mentality. We need to reduce the numbers of people that are on Rikers Island to any way we possibly can, including bail reform and other measures that the council has put forward. But we need to bring it back into the public eye. We talked a lot about stop and frisk and about the NYPD, and that's visible to many people. But Rikers is not visible, and oftentimes I think that's done on purpose.
It seems intentional, the isolation, penal colonies on an island and all.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to both our guests, I would ask, today the board voted, and I'd like to know how that went. What was the outcomes, and any interesting parts of it you'd like to share with us?
First, I'd like to start. It was very disappointing. It was a disappointing vote. The fact that the commissioner put forth a request to do rulemaking, which is the process by which the board establishes standards that the department has to adhere to on a range of issues. That the commissioner requested to do rulemaking to restructure how visits happen, who gets access to visits, to do rulemaking on punitive segregation, how long people can be in punitive segregation, and whether or not there's a 7-day out of punitive seg regulation, whether or not he wants to eliminate packages, that people can only receive packages from selected vendors, as if people were in state prison. It's almost like the state prison system. There was a host of rules that the commissioner wants to get at, and at this disguised as this opportunity to reduce violence. And it was a disappointing vote. The vote passed, but it was a vote that I and a few other of the colleagues on the board voted against, but unfortunately more voted for it, so it passed. So it was a very disappointing vote today.
I was concerned also with one of the council appointees, Michael Reagan, who I had hoped would vote the way that Stanley and I feel, and I think that the evidence presented itself for. In much of the discussion that the presentation that the commissioner put forward, he referred to anecdotals about people and violence on Rikers Island, and he was only able to use 2 examples about why he felt that the progress that we had made up until last January, when we first instituted the enhanced supervisory housing units that he himself put into Rikers Island, why now they're coming back and asking for a variance, for a change in those rules. And I think several of the board members, including Stanley, rightly pointed out that many of the folks that he's talking about are Brad H people, people who come to Rikers Island who have diagnosed mental illnesses and who need to be treated. Putting people into solitary confinement when they have mental illnesses only makes the problem worse. And they're not going to change by being put into solitary confinement. So Stanley asked what other measures are being taken to ensure that these people have been given an opportunity to address their mental health issues and also an opportunity to reduce the violence. And I think those are questions that we need to have answered before we can actually do any rule changing in the department.
What would you think the commission was hoping to really accomplish with this vote in terms of what he was proposing?
Well, I'll say this. I think it was a little bit of a give back to the union, and I feel that that's unfortunate. And I'm talking about the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association.
All right.
And that's why I like to see the evidence, and I like to see the numbers. And we're going to be having hearings on this in the City Council. And I would expect that when the commissioner comes in, he will be able to provide numbers. Today, he was not able to provide numbers. But our role in the City Council is partial oversight of the Department of Correction, as is the Board of Correction as well. And I hope that the next time that they come in, they're going to give us the numbers. If you're talking about 2 instances where people were violent and we have to change all the rules for solitary confinement because of these 2 instances, something's not right. And I need more answers on that.
I agree. I mean, none of the reasons the commissioner put forth would justify the drastic changes that he wants to propose. One of the things he wants to propose with respect to visits is he wants to be able to, depending upon various points of information, be able to deny or exclude certain individuals from visiting, right? One particular thing, he's looking at criminal history. Now, he's saying that criminal history alone is not going to be a determining factor for denying somebody's visit, but that's what he wants to factor in. So my question to him, they said out of 1,000 visits a day, one visitor gets arrested for bringing in contraband out of 1,000, roughly. My question to him, out of all of the people who got arrested from bringing contraband, and let me say, contraband is not accepted. The board does not condone people bringing contraband. The city council doesn't. If somebody brings contraband, they ought to be held accountable. They ought to be arrested and held accountable for that. But what we are saying is that we should not impact the 270,000 visits who come through Rikers each year to visit their loved ones because of few folks who are attempting to bring in contraband. So now he wants to use criminal history. So my question to him is, how many of the people who got arrested in 2014 and 2013 had criminal histories? My sense of it is that it would be very few of the people who got arrested bringing in contrabands. So then it begs the question, if folks who with criminal records are not the ones who are bringing in contraband, why would you use that as an exclusion to have people visit or to deny someone's visits? So there's a whole set of those kinds of issues on visits, on punitive seg, on enhanced supervision that just doesn't make sense.
And according to the Department of Investigation, their reports have shown that most of the contraband comes in to Rikers Island by staff. Yeah. And it's not actual visitors or other people bringing that stuff in. And so I think that issue needs to be looked at much more carefully before we decide to place this burden on visitors to Rikers Island.
Right. And there are a set of things I think that we could do that could enhance the safety, reduce the amount of contraband that's coming in that doesn't infringe on the rights and abilities of people to come and visit their loved ones. For example, we could have steady officers be assigned to many of the posts. Steady officers right now are not being assigned to many of the critical posts, the people who are supposed to be able to catch stuff. That doesn't happen. Adequate staff and having enough officers to be on the visit floor to be able to observe visits, right? Like, there's a bunch of things I think we could do right now that could enhance their ability to safely monitor visits and capture people who are bringing in contraband that doesn't infringe the rights of so many people.
So you say that if we had steady officers, someone that have time to become more familiar with the ins and outs and the persons that they're dealing with, it would be much better for the...
Absolutely. What we've been hearing, you know, I'm part of, as on the board, I'm part of the visit work group. What we've been hearing is the visit room captains have been saying the people who are staffing the visits are officers who get stuck. And those are officers who they've done their first shift, and because there's a shortage in another particular area, they get stuck to do mandatory overtime. So they're finishing off 1 or 2 shifts already. They get stuck for a 3rd shift. They're tired. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be stuck. And now they are being charged with monitoring the magnetometers. They're the ones being charged with monitoring the x-ray machines. They're the ones being charged with civilly engaging with families, giving them information so that they can see their loved ones. Those are the folks being charged with it. When they've done double shifts, they don't want to be there. It just doesn't make sense. And there are things we can do, like adequately staff the visit house.
It certainly doesn't sound like it's the makeup for someone that would be overly vigilant or over social after 2 or 3 shifts.
Yeah.
What you were saying, Councilman?
I was going to say that one of the other issues that came up today also was the issue of touch visits. So when you go there, you know, people like to touch, kiss, hug, or whatever, and oftentimes people, especially those who are in solitary, need that human contact.
Absolutely.
The other part of the equation that was brought up today was children coming to visit their family members, particularly women. Mothers who can't touch their children, or fathers who can't touch their children, you know, if they're going to be under this type of no-touch policy that the commissioner is proposing. So these are all issues of major concern moving forward, and while the rules, what's the word that they use, they're going to look at these rule changes, there's still time for people to voice their opposition to these types of changes. We don't want to see those types of changes happen.
Right.
Well, that's actually where I was going next. I mean, it's clear that both you gentlemen are doing what you can to fight against this, and what can our viewers do to become involved, to become active, to really assist in making a difference against this?
So a couple of really important things. One is, as a board of correction, we have to have public meetings. All of our meetings have to be public. There's a process by which we invite the public to participate, give information, give testimony, provide guidance on what the rules should look like. This is an opportunity for people to get up out of their seats, get up out of the sitting back watching this and really getting involved. Come down to those meetings. You can go to the New York City Board of Correction website. All of our meeting dates are posted there. All of the materials that, research materials that have been produced either by the Department of Corrections or by the Board of Corrections is available. We need people to participate. We need people to offer solutions, because here's the deal. The Board of Correction is not saying to the commissioner, and I'm not saying to the commissioner, we ought not make our jail safer. We ought not be doing what's right to make it safe for the people being detained there and for the officers, but we got to do it right. We shouldn't do it by infringing on the lives of so many men and women who go through Rikers and who come to visit people. So we need suggestions. We need people to come out and voice their concerns and voice their suggestions. Because the bottom line is, we want to fix the problem. We don't want to fix the problem by creating more problems.
Right, and there are advocacy groups that people can get involved with as well that come down and give testimony. And by the way, you weren't always allowed to give testimony. We had a fight to get that right. They denied me speaking time at former board meetings about 3.5, 4 years ago when I first tried to come down and speak. So we fought for that, we got that right, and now we need to use that right. And that's really important, it's critical. Sometimes people say, oh, they're not gonna really listen. But I think having that participation, and even the chair, Stanley Richards, today said that they had received a number of letters and heard from a number of the advocates, et cetera, so forth and so on. So we are beginning to make a difference in that, and we still need more people to come down to those hearings to join the advocacy groups.
So people are beginning to get more involved.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, that's wonderful news. So you guys have any closing comments you'd like to, or anything in addition you'd like to discuss?
I would just like to say, I feel like in this city, there is a wonderful moment in time for us to come together to really bring about a change in the criminal justice system. We have a city council with the speaker and members like Dromm who care about the issue, who are putting resources behind their positions on these issues, are speaking out against what's wrong, speaking for what's right. We have a mayor who talks about doing what's right, having one city, everybody involved, tackling the long-standing intrinsic problems that we've had as a city. We have a unique opportunity, but we have to seize that opportunity. The viewers of this show have to seize that opportunity. Fortune as an organization has been and will continue to seize that opportunity. We have a moment in time to really do things differently, and I think we have to take advantage of that.
Thank you. Councilmember?
Couldn't agree more, and I think that fighting for the rights of the formerly incarcerated is a civil rights issue. And I think moving and advancing that civil rights issue now is really important, because we're talking an awful lot about equality and treating people fairly, and this is just an extension of that. We've seen movements over the history of the course of this country, and how people have stood up and fought for their rights. This is just another extension of standing up and fighting for the rights of people who are incarcerated or detained in jails like Rikers Island.
Awesome. If not now, when?
Now.
Now.
Now is the time.
Well, I want to thank you both, Mr. Stanley Richards, Senior Vice President of Fortune Society, and Councilman Dromm for being our guest today. We certainly appreciate your views, your opinions, and your being here today.
Thank you.
So I want to say goodbye for now, and until our next episode. Again, thank you both for joining us here today on both sides of the bars. And thank you in TV Land for joining us as well. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on the web at fortunesociety.org or on Facebook by typing in the Fortune Society. This is Casimiro Torres as we critically look at both sides of the bars.